Welcome to the Crow's Tavern. Tonight, we'll journey back to the time of the Norse people, exploring their villages, customs, and daily lives as we drift toward peaceful sleep together. After our story ends, you'll hear the gentle sounds of a crackling fire that will continue for hours without interruption. These soothing sounds will help guide you into a deep and restful sleep. Now let us begin our journey into the Viking world and allow the ancient tales to carry you towards slumber. Silver moonlight spilled across the ancient path winding between towering pines, illuminating Odin's solitary figure as he walked the hidden ways between worlds. The Allfather moved with purpose but without haste, his aging bones carrying the weight of countless winters. His single eye reflected starlight as he gazed upward through gaps in the forest canopy, reading celestial patterns that few others could comprehend. The Raven King had chosen this night with care, when the boundaries between realms grew thin and memories flowed more freely across the branches of Yggdrasil. The journey to Mimir's well was not one undertaken lightly, even by the Allfather himself. It required not just physical travel, but passage through layers of reality that grew progressively more primordial as one descended toward the roots of the world tree. Here, at the boundaries where defined realms gave way to the raw stuff of creation, even one as powerful as Odin must proceed with caution and respect. He had departed as twilight settled over Asgard's golden spires, slipping away without ceremony while the feasting halls echoed with laughter and boasting. Thor's booming voice had risen above the clamor as he recounted his latest battle with mountain giants, his companions roaring approval at each dramatic turn in the tale. Odin had paused briefly at the great hall's entrance, his gaze lingering on his thunderous son. So vital, so present in each moment, so different from the quiet child Odin sought to remember tonight. Frigga had caught his eye across the crowded space, understanding immediately, passing between them without need for words. She alone knew his destination, having observed him crafting the silver offering coin by firelight in their private chambers over 7 consecutive nights. No questions had passed her lips, but her silent support had manifested in the small leather traveling pack left by his armor, containing provisions he would not physically need, but that represented her care extending beyond the boundaries of Asgard itself. Behind him, Asgard slept peacefully, its golden halls and towering spires temporarily forgotten as Odin pursued a more personal quest. The weight of rulership had momentarily lifted from his shoulders, replaced by a different burden altogether, that of memory, of personal rather than cosmic responsibilities, of a father's grief carried across centuries like a stone worn smooth by handling, yet no less heavy for its familiarity. Even Heimdall had merely nodded as the Allfather passed the Bifrost's entrance, understanding that some journeys required solitude and that certain paths could not be traveled via the Rainbow Bridge. The watchman's golden eyes had briefly met Odin's single one, centuries of service allowing him to convey respect and vigilance without breaking the silence that already enveloped the wanderer. He would keep watch, as always, but would not speak of Odin's absence unless directly questioned, and few would dare ask Heimdall about the Allfather's private movements. No ravens accompanied him tonight. Hugin and Munin remained perched in his empty hall, their normally restless forms unnaturally still, as if they too observed some ritual whose meaning was known only to the oldest of beings. Thought and memory, his constant companions, belonged in Asgard on this night. What Odin sought now lay beyond their domains, in places where the distinction between what was thought and what was remembered blurred into something more fundamental than either. He had taken the hidden paths, those secret ways between worlds known only to himself and perhaps a handful of others across the 9 realms. These were not the grand ceremonial connections like the Bifrost, but ancient, subtle passages that existed in the very structure of Yggdrasil itself. Some appeared only under certain astronomical alignments. Others required blood or breath or memories as keys. Still others existed permanently, but remained invisible to those who did not know precisely where and how to look for them. The forest grew denser as Odin descended deeper into the roots of the World Tree. Massive trunks of elderwood and ash rose around him, their bark gleaming silver-black in the filtered moonlight. These were no ordinary trees, but ancient beings in their own right, some having witnessed the earliest days of creation. They creaked and swayed slightly as he passed, though no wind stirred their highest branches. Acknowledgement, perhaps, or simply the natural response of living wood to the presence of power moving among its shadows. Odin's staff tapped rhythmically against stone and root as he navigated the increasingly difficult terrain. The sound echoed strangely, sometimes returning too quickly, sometimes lingering too long, as if the very air recognized him and responded to his presence. Small lights occasionally flickered at the edges of his vision. Nature spirits, perhaps, or memories too fragile to fully manifest. He acknowledged these watchers with slight nods, but did not engage. Keeping his focus on the path ahead, long experience had taught him that distraction in such places could lead to becoming lost in ways more profound than mere physical disorientation. Beings who allowed their attention to be fully captured by the wonders and curiosities of Yggdrasil's roots sometimes never returned to their own realms, becoming instead part of the great tree's vast consciousness, their individuality gradually absorbed like raindrops into an ocean. The descent continued, time stretching and compressing according to laws Odin had studied but never fully mastered. What seemed like hours might represent minutes in the world above. Conversely, moments of perfect clarity might contain subjective experiences that would require days to fully process once he returned to ordinary reality. He had prepared for this temporal distortion, arranging matters in Asgard to account for an absence that might extend beyond his intentions or control. As he ventured deeper, the path grew less defined, requiring intuition as much as observation to follow. This was the final challenge before reaching his destination, a test of sorts, ensuring that only those with proper purpose and preparation could approach Mimir's well. A wrong turning here would not result in mere delay, but might lead to pockets of reality where nightmares took physical form, or to the hunting grounds of entities that fed on memories and identity, leaving their victims as empty shells, devoid of self-knowledge. Odin navigated these dangers with the confidence of one who had faced them before, though never with complacency. Each visit required fresh awareness, fresh commitment, for the paths shifted between journeys, responding to changes in both traveler and destination. What had been safe passage during his last visit might now lead to oblivion. What had been impassable might now offer the most direct route. After what might have been hours, or merely moments, time flowed differently in this place between worlds. A subtle change in the atmosphere signaled that his journey neared its end. The oppressive weight of deeply buried reality lightened somewhat. The random patterns of light became more organized, gathering toward a central point ahead. The sound of water, not flowing but existing in perfect stillness, reached his ears as a kind of anti-sound, a negative space in the ambient noise of the forest. Odin reached a natural clearing that appeared both vast and intimate simultaneously, a paradox possible only in places where ordinary physical laws yielded to more fundamental principles of existence. The trees formed a perfect circle around a small dark pool of water, So still it appeared solid, its surface reflecting the stars visible through the circular opening in the canopy above, with such perfect clarity that it seemed one could step directly from earth to sky. 9 ancient runestones stood equidistant around the pool, each taller than a man and covered with symbols that seemed to shift and change when not observed directly. These were not ordinary runes that could be carved by mortal hands or even divine ones, but living concepts that manifested in physical form only due to the unique properties of this place, where thought and matter intersected. They represented the 9 realms, the 9 great branches of Yggdrasil, the 9 fundamental forces that shaped existence. Different interpretations of the same essential truths. Odin paused at the edge of the clearing, drawing a deep breath. The air here tasted different, ancient and heavy with secrets, carrying subtle traces of worlds both above and below. He had come to this place many times throughout the long centuries. First as a young god seeking knowledge, his heart burning with questions and ambitions. Later as a ruler requiring wisdom to guide his people through conflicts that threatened to tear the realms apart. And once, most memorably, in desperate need when he sacrificed his eye to drink from its waters, trading part of his physical sight for visions beyond ordinary perception. Each visit had changed him, shaped him, added layers to his understanding like rings in an ancient tree. The knowledge gained had served him well in ruling Asgard, in maintaining the delicate balance between realms, in preparing for threats both seen and unseen. Yet such wisdom carried its own burden, the weight of knowing what others did not, of glimpsing shadows of what might come to pass without the power to prevent all tragedies. Tonight's purpose was different. He sought neither knowledge nor prophecy, but something rarer and perhaps more precious. Remembrance, and, if the fates allowed, a moment of peace. Not the strategic peace of political alliances or the exhausted peace that follows battle, but the deeper tranquility that comes from acceptance of what has been and what must be. I have returned, old friend. Odin spoke softly to the air, to the water, to the essence that lingered in this sacred space. His voice, though quiet, carried power, not the commanding tone he used in Asgard's halls, but something more intimate and genuine, the voice of one addressing an equal rather than subjects. No breeze stirred the surface of the pool, yet something changed in the atmosphere, an acknowledgement, a welcome perhaps. The space itself seemed to recognize him, not as king or god, but as an old acquaintance returning after absence. The runestones began to hum almost imperceptibly, a sound felt in bone and blood rather than heard by ear. The vibration passed through the ground, up through Odin's legs and into his core, resonating with something fundamental in his being, a reminder that he too was part of the pattern, bound by threads of fate and meaning to all that existed. Odin approached the pool with measured steps, each footfall deliberate and reverent upon ground few beings had ever trod. Night birds fell silent as he passed, and small creatures of the forest paused in their nocturnal activities, sensing the presence of something ancient and powerful moving among them. The moonlight caught in his silver hair and beard, casting a faint halo around his weathered features. As he neared the water's edge, his reflection appeared on the mirror-like surface. An aging face, weathered by responsibility and hard choices. Deep lines etched around his eye and mouth, speaking of countless decisions that had shaped the fate of worlds. White hair and beard framed features that had forgotten how to appear carefree, though echoes of the young god he had once been occasionally surfaced in rare moments of laughter or wonder. The water showed his true self, stripped of grandeur and pretense. No glamour or illusion could survive the well's penetrating clarity. It reflected not merely physical appearance, but deeper essence. The golden eye patch covering his sacrificed eye seemed to gleam with its own inner light, a permanent reminder of the price of wisdom. His remaining eye, blue as the deepest winter sky, held thousands of years of memories, some cherished, others he would gladly forget if such forgetting were possible for one such as he. Here he was not the All-Father or the ruler of Asgard, not the wanderer or the war god or any of his many other aspects and names. Here he was simply Odin, with all his triumphs and regrets laid bare, facing himself without the masks that leadership and legend had placed upon him. The water did not judge what it revealed, it merely showed truth, leaving judgment to those brave enough to look upon it. He knelt at the water's edge, the leather of his simple traveling clothes creaking softly. From a small pouch at his belt, he withdrew a silver coin no larger than his thumbnail. Unlike the offerings he had brought in the past, coins inscribed with runes of knowledge or power, this one bore a single symbol, the rune of silence. He had crafted it himself in the quiet solitude of his private forge, imbuing the metal with intent as specific as it was rare for the knowledge-seeking god, the desire not to learn, but to remember. For what has been, not what will be, he murmured, placing the coin on his palm and holding it above the still waters. For voices once heard, now silent, for choices made and paths taken. The coin caught the moonlight as Odin tipped his palm, sending small ripples across the surface as it slipped beneath the water. Unlike ordinary coins that would sink immediately, this one descended with deliberate slowness, turning gently as it fell through the impossible depths of the seemingly shallow pool. As it vanished from sight, the humming from the runestones intensified, resonating in harmonies too complex for mortal ears to differentiate. Odin settled himself more comfortably by the water's edge, folding his legs beneath him and resting his staff across his knees. The initial ripples from the coin's entry faded, leaving the pool mirror-smooth once more, but now with a subtle luminescence coming from deep below, a gentle answering to his offering. The All-Father closed his eye, not in meditation but in openness, making himself receptive to whatever memories might rise from the depths. The first sensation was one of warmth, surprising in this cool forest hollow. It spread through Odin's chest like mulled wine on a winter's night, familiar and comforting. With it came faint laughter, distant yet clear, the unmistakable sound of Baldur's joy echoing across years and worlds. Not words, not yet, but the feeling of his son's presence, bright and untarnished by fate. Baldur, Odin whispered, the name both prayer and acknowledgement. The water's surface remained unbroken, but beneath it colors began to swirl, gold and silver and the particular blue of a summer sky in Asgard. They coalesced into shapes, indistinct at first, then gaining clarity as Odin watched with his single eye and sensed with senses beyond the physical. A young god runs across flowering meadows, his golden hair catching sunlight, his laughter trailing behind him like music. His mother, Frigg, watches with pride and love, so intense it brings moisture to her eyes. Nearby, other gods pause in their activities, drawn unconsciously to Baldur's presence, for he is beloved by all, a living embodiment of joy and light. The scene shifted, colors flowing and reforming into a different memory. Baldur as a young man, serious for once, standing with his father on Asgard's highest tower. Why must everything change, he asks, watching a star fall across the distant sky. Odin places a hand on his shoulder. feeling mortality already at work in one who should be immortal. Without change, there can be no growth, he answers, the words inadequate even then. Without endings, beginnings lose their meaning. Odin felt wetness on his cheek, a single tear escaping his control. The memory was his own, not drawn from the well, yet being here had brought it to the surface with painful clarity. He did not brush the tear away, but allowed it to fall, joining the waters of memory with his own grief, still fresh despite the passage of time. The well responded to this offering. The humming of the runestones deepened, vibrating through the earth beneath Odin's knees. The water's surface began to emit a soft mist, tendrils of memory vapor rising and curling in the night air. Within them, images formed and dissolved, each lasting only moments before yielding to the next. A tapestry of remembrance woven specifically for the All-Father's solitary viewing. Frigg weaving at her loom, fingers moving with practiced grace, occasionally pausing to glance out the window as if expecting someone who would not return, her face showing both sorrow and acceptance. A mother's knowledge that even gods cannot protect their children from fate. Thor as a young boy, following Balder with worshipful eyes, his small fingers clutching a wooden practice sword while his brother showed him not how to strike, but how to hold back strength when needed. The young Thor, all determination and barely contained energy, learning gentleness from his brother, long before he would learn the full measure of his power from his father. In another scene, the two brothers knelt by a stream, heads bent together over some small wonder, a water insect perhaps, or a particularly perfect stone, sharing the simple joy of discovery. Balder's patient explanations, Thor's enthusiastic questions, the bond between them visible as a tangible thing, golden and unbreakable in the light of childhood. Frigga watching her sons from a distance, her eyes filled with maternal pride yet shadowed by something else. A foreknowledge perhaps, or simply the wisdom of a mother who understands that joy and pain walk hand in hand through every life, even those of gods. Her fingers working at her spinning, creating patterns that somehow mirrored the relationships forming before her. Threads intertwining, separating, coming together again in new configurations. Loki watching from shadows, his expression unreadable even to Odin's practiced eye. A complex mixture of emotions played across the young trickster's features. Envy, yes, but also genuine affection, confusion, and the beginning seeds of something darker that would grow with time and circumstance. His clever hands idly forming shapes from nothing, small magics that revealed his talent even then, a brief moment when Balder called to him, included him, and the pure gratitude that flashed across Loki's face before being hidden behind a mask of casual acceptance. Even then, patterns forming that would lead to tragedy, yet not with the simple malice that later tales would assign. The brothers three, Balder, Thor and Loki, sitting together under Asgard's golden sky, sharing tales and dreams. Balder speaking of beauty and harmony, Thor of adventures yet to come, Loki of tricks and transformations that would upend expectations. Their laughter blending, three distinct notes forming a chord that once had seemed as if it would sound forever. How could any of them have known what lay ahead? How could even Odin, with all his wisdom, have foreseen how these three paths would diverge and intersect again with such devastating consequences? Odin watched these visions with the stillness of complete attention. Each fragment of memory was precious, each moment a gift from the well's depths. He had not come seeking answers or revelations, merely connection to what had been lost. The gentle parade of images brought both pain and comfort, as memories of loved ones always do. The mist thickened, swirling more purposefully now. The images it contained grew older, reaching further back into time's current. Odin recognized himself, younger and more reckless, standing at this very pool with two ravens newly bound to his service, his face still whole, both eyes bright with ambition and the thirst for knowledge that would eventually cost him so dearly. "I will know all things," the younger Odin declares to the well. "I will understand the patterns that move beneath the surface of creation." The present Odin watched his younger self with a mixture of fondness and regret. "How little you understood about the price of knowing," he murmured to the phantom. "How little any of us understand until the debts come due." As if responding to his words, the mist shifted again, showing not what had been, but what might have been. Glimpses of paths not taken, choices unmade. The images formed with tantalizing clarity, substantial enough to evoke emotion, yet ephemeral enough to maintain their status as possibilities rather than realities. Balder grown to full maturity, standing on the walls of Asgard, his golden light undimmed by death. In this vision, his youthful beauty had matured into something even more profound, wisdom tempered by joy, strength guided by compassion. He wore ceremonial armor that caught the light like a constellation brought to earth, and around him gathered younger gods who looked to him for guidance, much as he had once looked to Odin. Nearby stood Nanna, his wife, their hands occasionally brushing with the comfortable intimacy of a love that had deepened rather than diminished over centuries. Children moved among them, not just their own, but those of all Asgard, drawn to Balder's light and Nanna's gentle wisdom. In this unbroken timeline, they had become the heart of Asgard, its emotional center and conscience. Loki appeared in these visions too, transformed from how Odin knew him now, still mischievous, still clever beyond measure, but standing beside Balder rather than scheming from shadows. His tricks served to delight rather than wound, his intelligence channeled into solving problems rather than creating them. The bitterness that had poisoned his heart seemed absent, as if some critical moment of hurt or betrayal had never occurred, or had been healed before festering into hatred. Thor strode through the halls of Valhalla, Mjolnir at his side, but with a thoughtful demeanor that balanced his warrior's spirit. He had learned wisdom as well as warfare in this potential reality, tempering his strength with the judgment that comes from being truly seen and valued for all aspects of his nature, rather than just his might in battle. And beyond these three, others appeared. Siblings and friends who never came to be, relationships that might have flourished, a family unbroken by prophecy and fate. Odin saw himself there too, different in subtle but profound ways. Still the All-Father, still bearing the weight of rulership, yet not carrying the weight of rulership, yet not carrying the particular grief and regret that had become so fundamental to his actual existence. This alternate Odin smiled more readily, laughed with greater freedom, the hardness in his eyes softened by witnessing his family thrive rather than fracture. Most poignant of all, this vision showed Frigga and himself in quiet moments, sitting together in gardens, speaking in low voices by hearth fires, watching their children and grandchildren with shared pride. The distance that had grown between them after Baldar's death, that unspoken gulf of shared grief expressed differently, was absent here. Instead, their bond appeared stronger for having weathered storms together without being broken by them. Odin felt a momentary temptation to lose himself in these visions of what could never be, but gently set them aside. He had not come to Mimir's well to indulge in futile regrets or imagined alternatives. He had come to remember, to honor, and to find whatever measure of peace might still be possible for one who had set so many wheels of fate in motion. "Show me Mimir," he requested softly. The mist receded momentarily, then returned with renewed purpose. This time, the image it contained was crystal clear, a noble face with eyes deep as the well itself, flowing hair and beard framing features that somehow managed to express both extreme age and vibrant youth simultaneously. Mimir, the Wisdom Keeper, once Odin's friend and advisor before politics and war separated them. Mimir, whose severed head Odin had preserved with herbs and spells when it was returned to him as a warning and a trophy by the Vanir. The face in the mist smiled, a gesture so subtle it might have been imagined, yet Odin felt rather than saw the warmth directed toward him. No words were spoken. Mimir's true voice had been silent for ages, but understanding passed between them nevertheless. An acknowledgement of shared history, of bonds that transcended physical form, of wisdom hard-won through sacrifice. "You were right, old friend," Odin said quietly, "about so many things. The price of knowledge, the inevitability of certain patterns, the importance of accepting what cannot be changed while working to change what can." The face in the mist inclined slightly, accepting these words without vanity or resentment. Then it began to transform, features melting and reforming into those of Balder, not as he had been in life, but as he might appear now, matured by experience, yet still luminous with the inner light that had made him beloved by all. This vision of Balder did not speak either, but his eyes held messages that Odin read with his heart rather than his mind. Forgiveness, acceptance, and a love untouched by the circumstances of death or the long separation since. There was sadness there too, but without bitterness, the natural sorrow of partings, even those ordained by fate. Odin reached out instinctively, his weathered hand passing through the mist image without resistance. "My son," he whispered, the words barely audible, yet carrying the weight of centuries of grief and love. The vision of Balder smiled, that same bright smile that had once illuminated Asgard's halls, then slowly dissolved back into formless mist. But something remained, a presence not visible but felt, as if Balder's essence lingered near his father for a moment longer than the image itself. It was not communication in any ordinary sense, yet Odin received impressions that transcended simple emotion or thought, a complex tapestry of reassurance, of acceptance, of love, undiminished by separation or circumstance. There came, too, a sense of continuity, that what appeared as ending from one perspective represented transition from another, not reincarnation exactly, as mortals might conceive it, but a more fundamental truth about the nature of being itself. The essence that had been Baldin continued to exist, though transformed into something beyond Odin's ability to fully comprehend, even with his vast wisdom and experience. This was not the comforting fiction of afterlife taught to ease mortal fears of death, but something both simpler and more profound. The recognition that existence itself possessed dimensions beyond the perceptible, beyond even the 9 realms and their myriad inhabitants. Odin absorbed these impressions without attempting to translate them into concrete concepts. Some truths defied language, could only be experienced directly. He allowed the formless communication to wash through him, becoming part of his being rather than something separate to be analyzed and categorized. This, perhaps, was the true gift of Mimir's well. Not answers, but perspective. Not facts, but understanding. Around the well, the 9 runestones began to glow softly, their carved symbols illuminated from within by a pale blue light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with Odin's heartbeat. The connection was not coincidental. The stones responded to the presence of conscious intention, particularly when that consciousness carried the weight of divinity and the specific resonance of one who had previously sacrificed to the well. The humming that had been present since Odin's arrival changed its tone, becoming almost melodic, a song without words, expressing emotions too complex for language. It reminded Odin simultaneously of lullabies sung to him in infancy, of victory chants on ancient battlefields, of funeral dirges for fallen comrades, of celebration songs at the births of his children, all overlapping yet somehow harmonizing into a single, unified expression of existence in all its variety. The runes themselves seemed to shift and realign, forming new combinations that suggested concepts beyond their individual meanings. Knowledge not as static information but as living process. Wisdom not as accumulated facts but as capacity for understanding. Memory not as record of past events, but as foundation for future growth. Periodically, a symbol would detach itself briefly from its stone, floating in the air before returning to its place, or migrating to another stone, creating new juxtapositions, and therefore new meanings. The clearing itself appeared to contract and expand subtly, not physically but in terms of perceived space, as if reality adjusted itself to accommodate the intensity of communion occurring at its center. At times, the well seemed to occupy the entire universe, with everything else, including Odin himself, existing within its circumference. At other moments, it shrank to a pinpoint of perfect clarity, a singularity of meaning around which all other experience organized itself. These perceptual shifts occurred without disorientation or distress, feeling instead like natural adjustments of perspective, like eyes focusing at different distances. Odin understood this for the gift it was. Here, in this place between worlds, the barriers between life and death, past and present, were momentarily thinned. Not broken, even Mimir's well could not accomplish that, but rendered permeable enough to allow a father and son to share the same space, if only in the realm of memory and feeling. The All-Father sat in perfect stillness, absorbing this presence, committing every nuance to memory. This was why he had come, though he had not dared hope for such clarity of connection, not for knowledge or prophecy or power, but for this moment of communion with what had been lost. Gradually, the mist began to thin, the presence fading like starlight at dawn. Odin did not resist this natural withdrawal, understanding that even in this magical place, such moments could not be indefinitely prolonged. Instead, he offered silent gratitude to Mimir's essence, to the well itself, to whatever aspects of fate had allowed this brief reunion. As the last of the mist dissipated, returning to the still waters of the pool, a new sensation arose. A subtle pressure at the edge of Odin's awareness, like words spoken just below the threshold of hearing. Not Balder now, not Mimir, but something older and less defined. The well itself, perhaps. Odin leaned forward slightly, his reflection rippling, though he had not touched the water. The pressure increased, forming patterns that almost resembled language. Not prophecy, he had not asked for foreknowledge, but something being offered nonetheless. Some truth rising unbidden from the depths. The All-Father hesitated, then accepted what was being presented. After all, Mimir's well seldom offered without purpose, and he had long ago learned the folly of refusing wisdom, whatever its source or timing. The whispers took form in his mind, not as words precisely, but as understanding. The cycle turns again. What was scattered shall be gathered. What was broken shall be mended, though not as it was before. The children return to the bones of their fathers when the last leaf falls. Cryptic as such communications often were, yet Odin felt the importance of these concepts settling into his consciousness, like stones dropping into deep water. Not a prophecy of doom or triumph, but something more fundamental, an acknowledgement of natural order, of renewal following loss, of continuity despite apparent endings. "Thank you," he murmured, accepting this unexpected gift with the gravity it deserved. He would contemplate its meanings later, in the solitude of his own halls. For now, it was enough to recognize it as valuable, another thread in the complex tapestry of understanding he had been weaving throughout his long existence. The runestone's glow began to fade, their humming quieting to the barest suggestion of sound. The well was returning to its normal state, the rare moment of connection drawing to its natural close. Odin made no move to extend it, respecting the boundaries that even he must observe. Instead, he reached once more into the pouch at his belt, withdrawing a small object wrapped in cloth. Carefully, he unfolded the covering to reveal a carved wooden figure no larger than his thumb, a simple representation of a laughing child, crafted with more love than skill. Balder had made it for him countless seasons ago, a gift that had remained on Odin's private altar through all the intervening years. With reverence, Odin placed the small carving on the stone beside the pool, not an offering to be taken, but a gesture of connection, something that had been touched by the one remembered, left temporarily in a place where the boundaries between worlds grew thin. He would retrieve it before departing, carrying it back to Asgard with whatever lingering essence might attach to it from this sacred contact. "Until we meet again," he said simply, addressing all who had appeared to him this night. Mimir, Balder, and the countless unnamed whispers that had shared their wisdom. The pool's surface remained still, offering no further visions, but the air held a quality of attentive silence, as if the well itself acknowledged his words. The clearing felt peaceful now, the weight of memory transformed from burden to blessing through the simple act of recognition and acceptance. Odin settled more comfortably on the stone, preparing to spend the remaining hours of darkness in quiet contemplation. There was no need to rush back to Asgard and its endless demands. Here, beside Mimir's well with the stars wheeling overhead and the runestones standing silent guard, he could simply be, not Allfather or Raven King or God of Wisdom, but merely Odin, a being who had loved and lost and continued onward, carrying his memories like precious gems in the pouch of his existence. The night deepened around him, darkness gathering like a cloak drawn close against the chill of existence. Stars shifted their positions overhead, visible through gaps in Yggdrasil's vast canopy, their movement marking the passage of time in the oldest calendar known to gods or mortals. Cosmic winds stirred the world tree's branches imperceptibly, creating harmonies too subtle for ordinary hearing, but perceptible to Odin in his state of perfect receptivity. Each constellation told its own story, tales older than Asgard itself, some predating even Odin's long memory. There hung the great wolf, stars forming the shape of Fenrir before his binding, a reminder of dangers still to come. Nearby shone the hammer, Thor's might reflected in the heavens. The ship sailed its endless cosmic journey along the night sky's ocean, carrying the souls of warriors to their eventual rest. The spinner wove patterns of fate with stars for thread, eternally creating and recreating the tapestry of existence. Occasionally, Odin would look up to read these patterns, finding familiar formations that had guided him throughout countless journeys across the 9 realms. He had taught himself their meanings over countless centuries, learning to interpret their subtle shifts and alignments. Some he had named himself, others bore designations that came from civilizations long vanished from memory, preserved only in the Allfather's vast store of knowledge. Between these observations, he allowed his thoughts to wander freely, neither clinging to the visions he had experienced nor pushing them away, but simply holding them in the open palm of awareness. This was a form of meditation few would associate with the ever-active, ever-seeking Odin of legend. This capacity for perfect stillness, for being fully present with what is, rather than constantly striving for what might be. In this state, memories and impressions flowed through his consciousness like water through cupped hands, experienced fully, yet not grasped at or rejected. The faces of his sons, both as they had been in their youth and as they had appeared in the well's visions. The feeling of Frigg's hand in his, warm and strong despite its delicacy. The weight of Gungnir in his grip, both weapon and symbol of authority. The whispers of ravens bringing news from distant realms. The countless battlefields where he had stood, sometimes victorious, sometimes in retreat, always changed by the experience in ways beyond the physical. Each memory arose, existed for a moment in the space of his awareness, then receded naturally to make room for the next, like waves on a shoreline. There was no attempt to organize or categorize them, no effort to extract lessons or meanings. This was not analysis, but pure experience, a way of being that Odin rarely permitted himself amid the constant demands of rulership and cosmic responsibility. Time passed differently in this deep hollow beneath Yggdrasil's roots. What might have been moments could have been hours. What felt like a brief meditation might have encompassed days by ordinary reckoning. Such distinctions mattered little here, where past, present, and possible futures intermingled like streams flowing into a single river. Stories and sagas spoke of Odin's restlessness, his constant seeking and scheming, the driven quality that led him to sacrifice comfort and safety in pursuit of knowledge. Tales recounted his many disguises and wanderings, his bargains and challenges, his tests of both gods and mortals. These accounts painted him as perpetually in motion, eternally dissatisfied, forever looking toward horizons not yet reached. Few understood or recorded these other moments, times of perfect stillness when the All-Father ceased his eternal quest for knowledge and simply existed within the flow of what was, what had been, and what might yet come. Perhaps because such moments were private, witnessed by none but himself and the ancient powers that formed the foundation of the worlds. Perhaps too because they contradicted the popular conception of Odin as strategist and manipulator, revealing instead a being capable of profound acceptance and peace. Yet these interludes of perfect presence were as essential to Odin's nature as his more dramatic qualities. They represented not weakness or lapse in vigilance, but profound strength, the capacity to be fully present with reality as it existed, rather than constantly striving to bend it to his will. In such moments, the weight of 9 worlds resting upon his shoulders became not burden but privilege. His vast responsibilities not obligation, but natural expression of his place in the order of things. The stars continued their stately procession overhead, marking the passage of hours as defined in realms more bound by conventional time. Their light, reflected in the well's still surface, created patterns too complex for coincidence, yet too fluid for deliberate design. A perfect metaphor for existence itself, balanced between chaos and order, between random chance and destiny. creatures of the deep forest went about their nocturnal business around the clearing's edge, respectful of its power but unafraid. Occasionally, small eyes would gleam momentarily from between ancient tree trunks. Foxes, perhaps, or wolves, or beings with no names in mortal tongues. They observed the All-Father with curiosity rather than fear or reverence, sensing perhaps that in this place, at this moment, he was simply another being sharing the great mystery of existence, rather than God or king demanding obedience. As the darkness began to soften toward dawn, though true sunrise would not reach this deep hollow beneath Yggdrasil's roots, Odin finally stirred from his contemplation. The transition was gradual, awareness shifting from expanded communion back to more ordinary consciousness, though carrying with it the essence of what had been experienced. His physical form, which had remained perfectly still for what might have been hours or days, began to move again, joints that should have been stiff and painful functioning with the fluid grace of youthful vigor despite his apparent age. With movements deliberate and unhurried, he collected the small wooden carving from the stone where it had rested through the night's communion. It felt different in his palm now, not physically altered, but somehow more present, more real, as if it had absorbed something of both this place and the essence of its maker during the hours it had spent beside the well. He re-wrapped it carefully in its cloth covering, handling it with the reverence normally reserved for powerful magical artifacts or sacred relics, though its value was entirely personal rather than objective. He rose to his feet in a single fluid motion that belied his apparent age, retrieving his staff from where it lay across the stones. After brushing fragments of moss from his simple traveling clothes, he turned to face the pool one final time. "Farewell, Mimir," he said formally, inclining his head toward the still waters. "Keeper of memories, holder of wisdom, I thank you for your hospitality and your gifts." There was no visible response from the pool, yet Odin sensed acknowledgement in the quality of silence that followed his words. With a final nod to the ancient runestones that had witnessed this night's communion, he turned and began the journey back along the hidden path that had led him to this sacred place. As he walked, retracing his steps through the tangles of Yggdrasil's roots and into the more defined forest above, Odin felt a subtle difference in his spirit, a particular quality of peace that came not from resolving problems or gaining advantage, but from simple acceptance of what was, had been, and would be. The tension that normally resided between his shoulders, the physical manifestation of constant vigilance, had eased, replaced by a centered calm that radiated outward from his core. The forest itself seemed to respond to this change in him. Whereas journey downward had been marked by silence and watchful wariness from the creatures and spirits that dwelled among these ancient trees, his return passage drew different reactions. Small lights, nature spirits perhaps, danced briefly in his peripheral vision, no longer hiding but offering momentary accompaniment. Nightbirds resumed their songs, rather than falling silent as he passed. Once, a great stag with antlers that seemed to mirror the branches overhead stepped onto the path before him, regarded him with eyes that held unexpected wisdom, then bowed its noble head slightly before moving aside to let him pass. Odin acknowledged these gestures with the same quiet acceptance that now characterized his entire being, neither seeking nor avoiding such encounters, simply allowing them their place in the pattern of this journey. He understood that he was being honored, not as Asgard's king or as the fearsome All-Father of legend, but as a fellow traveler in the vast interconnected reality that Yggdrasil both contained and represented. The whispers from the well remained with him, not as burden, but as gentle reminder that even gods existed within cycles larger than themselves. The cryptic message about gathering what was scattered and mending what was broken settled into his awareness like a seed planted in fertile soil, not demanding immediate interpretation or action, but establishing itself as something that would grow in meaning when the proper season arrived. This was wisdom of a different sort than he typically sought. Not tactical advantage or strategic foresight, but perspective. The reminder that endings were also beginnings, that cycles of loss and renewal had governed existence since the first moments of creation and would continue long after even the gods had played their final roles in the cosmic drama. As he climbed steadily upward, leaving the deepest roots behind, Odin found himself humming an ancient melody, a song so old he could not recall when he had first learned it. The tune predated formal music, predated language itself perhaps, a sequence of notes that somehow captured the essence of journey and return, of things lost and found again in altered form. His deep voice resonated among the trees, not disturbing the forest's peace, but becoming part of it, one more thread in the complex tapestry of night sounds. By the time the forest began to thin, revealing glimpses of the broader world beyond, Odin's thoughts had already begun turning toward Asgard and the responsibilities awaiting his return. Yet something essential had shifted during the night's communion. He would face these duties not with resignation or urgency, but with the centered calm of one who has remembered both his purpose and its place within the greater pattern. The stars faded as Odin emerged from the forest's edge onto a high cliff overlooking vast distances. Far below, morning mist clung to valley floors, silver white in the strengthening light. Beyond, mountains rose in purple majesty, their peaks already touched with the day's first golden rays, and beyond them, visible only to Odin's single eye, the glimmering suggestion of Asgard itself, waiting for its king's return. Odin paused to absorb this view, one hand unconsciously moving to touch the pouch where Baldur's carving rested against his side. The world, all the worlds, continued their stately dance through time and space, beautiful in their complexity, heartbreaking in their impermanence, perfect in their essential nature. So it has been, Odin murmured to the dawn, so it shall be. With these words, acknowledgement and acceptance in equal measure, the All-Father continued his journey. He walked steadily toward the hidden paths between worlds that would return him to Asgard's golden halls, carrying with him the whispers of Mimir's well, memories honored, connections renewed, and one quiet truth that would, in its own time and way, shape the course of fate with calm inevitability. As Odin departed from Mimir's well, the ancient whispers of memory fading behind him, another story began to stir in the cosmic tapestry of Yggdrasil. While the All-Father carried his renewed connection with the past back toward Asgard, his queen Frigg sat alone in her private chambers, fingers dancing across her loom with supernatural grace. The transition from one tale to another mirrors the very nature of Norse mythology itself. Interconnected stories flowing into one another like tributaries joining a greater river. Just as Odin sought wisdom and remembrance at the roots of the world tree, so too does Frigg weave destiny with threads both seen and unseen. Where the whispering stones of Mimir's well explored the quiet contemplation of the past and the acceptance of what has been, Frigg's thread and the feather of fate will guide us through the delicate weaving of what is yet to come, from the father's grief to the mother's foresight, from memory to prophecy, from acceptance to action. As the light of approaching dawn touched the highest branches of Yggdrasil, signaling the end of Odin's nighttime journey. The first pale rays also illuminated Frigg's sacred feather, a gift from the Norns themselves, as it floated above her weaving, waiting to become part of our next story. The eternal twilight of Asgard bathes the highest tower of Fensalir in silver pool light, casting long shadows across the polished stone floor. Here, in her private sanctuary, Frigg sits before her loom, fingers moving with practiced grace as she weaves the threads of fate. The All-Mother's chambers are a place of profound peace, removed from the revelry of Valhalla and the constant bustle of the gods' affairs. Tonight, the air itself seems to hold its breath, waiting and watching as divine hands craft the destinies of countless beings across the 9 realms. Frigg's loom is unlike any found in the halls of mortal weavers. Crafted from the living wood of Yggdrasil itself, it hums with subtle power as she works. The shuttle passes back and forth with a rhythm as steady as the beating of the world's heart. Each thread she selects gleams with inner light, some golden bright with joy and triumph, others silver grey with sorrow, deep purple with wisdom, or blood red with sacrifice. Together they form patterns of astonishing complexity, a tapestry that captures the interwoven lives of gods and mortals alike. Above her, the ceiling of her weaving room opens to the night sky, where stars shine with unusual clarity. These are not merely distant points of light, but living constellations that shift subtly as she works, responding to the patterns forming beneath her hands. Some ancient souls believe that Frigg's weaving determines the position of the stars themselves, while others whisper that the stars guide her fingers toward their ordained destinations. The truth, perhaps, lies somewhere between, a dance of influence flowing both ways between weaver and heavens. The goddess works in silence, her focus absolute. Her pale hands move with certainty born of countless ages at this same loom. Her face, beautiful beyond mortal comprehension yet marked with the subtle lines of profound wisdom, remains serene. Only her eyes, deep as mountain pools and shifting like northern lights, reveal the weight of her work, flicking occasionally to reference the stars above or to select the next thread with careful deliberation. She wears a simple gown of midnight blue, adorned only with a belt of silver from which hang tiny scissors, a measuring cord, and other tools of her sacred craft. So absorbed is Frigg in her weaving that she doesn't immediately notice when another presence enters her sanctuary. The air stirs, gentle as a thought, carrying with it the scent of wind across distant battlefields and the faint whisper of ravens' wings. No footsteps announce the newcomer, yet suddenly he is there. Odin, the All-Father, standing in shadows deeper than those cast by mere absence of light. He watches his queen in silence, his single eye reflecting starlight as it focuses on the wonder of her work. Husband, Frigg acknowledges without looking up, a smile warming her voice. Her fingers never falter in their complex dance across the loom. The rhythm of her work continues, unbroken, a tempo as ancient as time itself. Each movement flows into the next with fluid precision, creating a mesmerizing cadence that seems to harmonize with the slow turning of stars overhead. You move quietly tonight. Odin steps forward, emerging from the shadows. Unlike his appearances before, warriors or kings, he wears no ceremonial armor or crown. His silver-streaked beard is neatly trimmed, his weathered face relaxed in this private moment. He bears Gungnir, his spear, but holds it loosely, more habit than necessity in this most secure of places. I did not wish to disturb your concentration, he replies, his voice low like distant thunder contained in human speech. The words emerge with careful modulation, as if even here, in this most private of sanctuaries, he measures the power that lies dormant in his utterances. The patterns you weave tonight seem particularly intricate. A single raven's feather drifts from his cloak as he speaks, spiraling lazily to the floor where it dissolves into shadow without a sound. The brief phenomenon goes unremarked by either god. Such manifestations of their essence occur naturally in their presence, reality itself responding to the concentrated divinity that flows through their forms. The air between them shimmers almost imperceptibly with unspoken understanding, built over eons of partnership. Frigg's smile deepens as she finally glances up at him, her hands still working automatically, guided by instinct honed over millennia. The smile transforms her countenance from divine serenity to something warmer and more intimate, an expression reserved solely for her husband in these private moments away from the watchful eyes of other gods and goddesses. Light from both stars above and the glowing threads below catches in her eyes, creating depths that seem to contain galaxies within their gaze. "Come closer and see," she invites, her voice carrying the gentle authority of one who understands the underlying structure of existence itself. Her invitation is both literal and symbolic, an offering to share not merely her physical workspace, but the special perception through which she views the interconnected nature of all things. Tonight's weaving shows unusual confluences. The threads of several lives cross in ways I did not anticipate. As she speaks, the very air around the loom seems to thicken slightly, becoming more receptive to impression and influence. This is the nature of her craft, not merely physical threading, but the manipulation of possibility itself, shaping potential through the conduit of her divine attention. The space around her work becomes a threshold between definite reality and malleable potential, a sacred liminality where fate takes form before flowing outward to touch countless lives across the 9 realms. Odin approaches the loom with measured steps, respectful of the sacred work performed there. Though he holds dominion over war, wisdom, poetry, and death, even the All-Father treats the mysteries of fate's weaving with cautious reverence. He studies the tapestry taking shape before him, his single eye gleaming with reflected starlight and the luminescence of the threads themselves. "I see the pattern of the farmer's daughter in Midgard," he observes, indicating a thread of warm amber, "the one who prayed to you last harvest moon." "Yes," Frigg confirms, her fingers dancing between shuttles of different colors. Her life entwines now with the merchant's son from the coastal village. Here, she points to a royal blue thread that crosses and twines with the amber strand. "And see how both connect to this silver thread? The wandering skald who will sing their story and carry it to distant lands." Odin observes the interplay of colors and textures with keen interest. Unlike most who view Frigg's work, he can perceive some of the deeper meanings woven into each intersection, each loop and knot. Not even he can see all that his wife encompasses in her weaving, but his wisdom grants him greater insight than most. Their meeting brings joy, he notes, seeing how the threads brighten where they touch. And challenge, Frigg adds, selecting a thread of deep indigo. The father disapproves. Old grievances between families must be reconciled. Her tone remains neutral, neither approving nor lamenting the complications she weaves. This is the nature of fate. Neither wholly cruel nor entirely kind, but intricate beyond simple judgment. As Odin watches her work, his attention is drawn to something resting beside the loom. Something that does not belong among Frigg's careful arrangement of threads and tools. A feather, pure white with the faintest shimmer of silver along its edge, lies upon the stone shelf where Frigg keeps her finest threads. Unlike ordinary feathers from Midgard's birds, this one seems to emit a subtle glow, as if remembering light it once absorbed. "You have a visitor's token," Odin observes, gesturing toward the feather with a slight inclination of his head. Frigg's eyes follow his gesture, her expression softening further at the sight of the feather. "Indeed, I discovered it as twilight deepened. A gift unintentional, I believe." Her hands slow momentarily in their work, though they do not stop entirely. "One of your Valkyries passed this tower on her return from Midgard. The feather fell from her wing as she flew. A sign I have been contemplating while I weave." Odin steps closer to examine the feather, careful not to touch it. "Brynhilde," he determines after a moment, recognizing something in the feather's pattern that would be invisible to any eye but his. "She returned from the southern fields, where a skirmish left 3 warriors worthy of Valhalla's halls." Frigg nods in acknowledgement, returning her full attention to the loom. Her fingers select a thread of misty blue, incorporating it into an area representing the realm beyond physical existence. She sleeps now in the Hall of Wings, exhausted from her journey. A note of motherly concern enters her voice, revealing the compassion that extends beyond her role as weaver of fate to encompass nurturing care for all beings under her attention. The youngest one, I think, troubled her spirit. Barely a man, yet he fought with the courage of seasoned warriors. The Hall of Wings comes into momentary focus through their shared divine consciousness. A vast chamber with walls that seem both solid stone and intangible mist simultaneously. There, rows of alabaster beds hold slumbering Valkyries, their magnificent wings folded in repose, occasional feathers drifting free as they dream of battles past and yet to come. Among them lies Brynhilde, her sleep deeper than her sister's, her breathing carrying the slight unevenness of one whose heart remains engaged with recent duties, even as her body surrenders to necessary rest. In her dreams, the young warrior's face appears again, his expression transitioning from battle fury to surprise, then to a profound acceptance that seemed beyond his years as Brynhilde's hand extended toward his spirit. His passage to Valhalla had been smooth, his soul untethered by regret or resistance, yet something in that moment of transition had touched the Valkyrie's eternal heart. Perhaps it was the glimpse of what might have been, the potential future severed by his early fall, the lives he might have influenced had his thread continued its course in Midgard, rather than transferring to the golden halls of Valhalla. "I saw him enter the hall," Odin confirms, his voice neutral but not unkind. "He walks now with his ancestors, learning the ways of Valhalla from those who went before." A comfortable silence falls between them, filled only with the gentle click of the loom and the almost imperceptible song of stars overhead. Frigg's fingers move with renewed purpose, incorporating threads of deep crimson and burnished gold into the section she currently weaves. Odin watches, respectful of her concentration, his weathered hand resting lightly on the back of her chair. After several minutes, Frigg speaks again, her voice thoughtful. "The feather corresponds to a thread I cannot seem to place properly within the pattern. She indicates a strand of unusual composition, neither purely silver nor gold, but shifting between colors as it catches different angles of light. This life hangs in unusual balance, neither firmly anchored in its course, nor entirely free to drift." Odin studies the thread with heightened interest. Anomalies in Frigg's weaving are rare. Most lives, while complex, follow patterns recognizable to one who has observed the tapestry of existence for as long as they have. "A mortal whose fate resists definition," he muses. "Curious, more than curious," Frigg corrects gently. "Potentially significant. Such threads often indicate pivotal moments in broader patterns." Her eyes lift to the stars above, reading celestial alignments invisible to lesser beings. The Norns themselves seem uncertain about this one's path. At the mention of the Norns, those ancient beings who tend the roots of Yggdrasil and govern even the gods' destinies, Odin's expression grows more serious. "Show me," he requests, moving to stand where he can better see both the tapestry and Frigg's face as she works. With deliberate movements, Frigg draws forth the curious thread, holding it separate momentarily before attempting once more to integrate it into the developing pattern. Where normal threads would settle naturally into their ordained positions, this one seems to resist, slipping from its intended path to create unexpected kinks and loops in the design. "You see?" she says, a rare note of frustration coloring her voice. "It refuses its place." Odin extends his hand, hovering it over the loom without touching. His single eye half closes in concentration as he senses the energies flowing through the threads. There is no malevolence here, he determines after a moment. No interference from forces that would disrupt your work. This uncertainty comes from within the life itself. "Yes," Frigg agrees, her expression thoughtful. "A soul at a crossroads, perhaps, or one whose nature defies easy categorization." She selects a different shuttle, trying a new approach to incorporate the rebellious thread. "The fallen feather appeared just as I began working with this strand. I do not believe in such coincidences." "Nor I," Odin responds, his gaze moving between the glowing feather and the troublesome thread. With careful movements, he reaches for the feather, lifting it with reverent fingers. Unlike ordinary feathers, it retains perfect rigidity, as if carved from some divine substance, rather than grown from living tissue. Perhaps there is connection to be found here. Frigg pauses in her weaving, watching as Odin examines the feather more closely. The All-Father turns it slowly in the starlight, observing how the silvery patterns along its edge catch and refract the celestial illumination. His eye narrows in concentration, reading meanings within the feather's structure that would remain invisible to any other being in the Nine Realms. Brynhilda carried more than warriors' souls on her return journey, he says finally, his voice softened with revelation. She witnessed this life. He gestures toward the troublesome thread. In a moment of decision, the resonance of that encounter clings to her still, manifested in this fallen feather. Frigg considers this with growing interest. The Valkyries normally concern themselves only with the battlefield dead. For one to take notice of a living mortal, she leaves the implication hanging in the star-dappled air between them. Indeed, Odin places the feather carefully back beside the loom. "Let us see what can be discerned." Together they focus their combined awareness, Frigg's intimate knowledge of life's patterns, Odin's far-seeing wisdom, upon the strange thread and its possible connection to the Valkyrie's feather. The air in the tower room grows heavier with concentrated divine attention, the stars above pulsing in rhythm with their thoughts. Within this sacred space between heartbeats, impressions form and solidify, glimpses of immortal life unfolding in the middle realm. A young woman appears in their shared vision, neither queen nor warrior, but a healer in a small village near the northern seas. Her hands move with gentle confidence as she binds wounds and brews remedies from plants gathered at dawn and dusk. Her eyes hold sadness beyond her years, yet kindle with fierce determination when needed. Around her neck hangs a small pendant of amber, within which tiny fragments of herbs are eternally preserved. Astrid, Frigg murmurs, the name rising to her consciousness from the thread itself. Called to healing from childhood, yet walking a knife's edge between faith and doubt. Odin nods, seeing deeper layers of the vision. She stands at the threshold of a village hall, hesitating. Inside, a man lies dying from wounds no ordinary healer can mend, a chieftain beloved by his people. His brow furrows slightly. She carries knowledge passed in secret from her grandmother, old magic that predates even the worship of our names in that region. She fears, Frigg observes, her fingers hovering over the thread without touching it. Not the magic itself, but its consequences. The village elders distrust the old ways, seeing only the new god's paths as righteous. The vision shifts, showing the healer gathering rare plants under moonlight, whispering prayers to entities older than named gods, spirits of earth and water, ancient forces that resided in Midgard before humanity recognized divine presences. Her hands tremble slightly as she works, aware that discovery could mean exile, or worse. She has already lost much, Odin notes, seeing shadows of past grief surrounding the woman. Her husband to the same raid that wounded the chieftain, her position in the village secure only through her healing gifts. And yet, Frigg continues, seeing the pattern unfold, if she uses the old magic to save the chieftain, she risks exposing her connection to ways many now fear. If she refrains, he will certainly die before dawn, and with him much of the village's future security. They watch as Astrid kneels beside a small stream, washing herbs in water that reflects the same stars that shine above Frigg's tower. The healer's lips move in whispered debate with herself, tears occasionally slipping down her cheeks to join the flowing water. This is the moment Brynhilda witnessed, Odin realizes, his voice unusually gentle. Not on her outward journey to collect fallen warriors, but on her return. The Valkyrie paused, drawn by the intensity of the woman's struggle. Frigg nods slowly, understanding dawning in her ageless eyes. A mortal deciding between personal safety and service to others, between the comfortable path and the dangerous one. Such moments of moral choosing resonate across realms. She returns her attention to the loom, studying how the troublesome thread connects to others in the broader pattern. If she chooses safety, her thread continues predictably, bumpy, respected healer, eventually elder, peacefully passing, surrounded by those she taught. And if she chooses risk, Odin prompts, though he has already glimpsed this alternate path. Chaos, Frigg answers simply. Not merely for her life, but for many others connected to hers. The chieftain lives, but her secret is discovered. Some call for her punishment, others defend her. The village divides. Old tensions resurface. Her fingers trace the potential patterns without weaving them. Yet from this discord, reconciliation might eventually emerge between old ways and new. Understanding rather than fear. Integration rather than division. Odin strokes his beard thoughtfully, watching how starlight plays across the unfinished tapestry. Greater growth through greater suffering, he summarizes. A pattern repeated endlessly across realms and ages. Yes, Frigg confirms, her voice holding neither judgment nor preference for either path. And this is why her thread resists placement. Both futures remain equally possible at this moment. She stands precisely balanced between choices, her heart divided against itself. They fall silent again, contemplating the mortal's dilemma. Outside the tower window, Asgard sleeps peacefully under star-dappled skies. Distant sounds of celebration drift occasionally from Valhalla, where the new arrivals are welcomed with feasting and tales of glory. Yet here in Frigg's sanctuary, attention remains fixed on a single human life, poised at its defining moment. The feather, Odin says eventually, indicating the Valkyrie's token still resting beside the loom. Its presence suggests significance beyond ordinary fate weaving. Perhaps intervention is permitted in this instance. Frigg considers this possibility with characteristic thoroughness, her ageless face revealing nothing of her thoughts. We rarely interpose ourselves in such moments of moral choosing, she reminds him gently. The growth comes precisely from making the choice without divine guidance. Indeed, Odin acknowledges, yet occasionally a subtle touch may be warranted, not to decide for them, but to strengthen them for the decision. The All-Mother's fingers still honour her loom as she weighs this suggestion against the accumulated wisdom of countless ages observing mortal lives. What form would such a touch take? She asks finally. In answer, Odin reaches again for the Valkyrie's feather, holding it reverently in his weathered palm. A dream, perhaps, not of instruction, but of remembrance. Her grandmother's teachings made vivid once more in sleep's embrace. Frigg's expression softens at this proposal. A gentle touch indeed. The choice remains hers, but with clearer understanding of the legacy she carries. She extends her hand, and Odin places the feather carefully across her palm. Together, they focus their awareness upon it, infusing the divine token with specific intent. The feather begins to glow more brightly under their combined attention, absorbing the essence of their purpose. Odin murmurs words in a language older than human comprehension, neither spell nor command, but rather a shaping of potential. Frigg's fingers trace patterns in the air above the feather, weaving intention as skillfully as she weaves thread. Gradually the feather's light shifts, taking on a warm amber hue reminiscent of dawn rather than the cool silver of Valkyrie flight. It is done, Frigg says softly when the transformation completes. When Brynhild awakes, she will feel the absence of this feather and know it serves another purpose now. She may even glimpse the dream it carries to Midgard. Odin nods, satisfied with their work. Send it forth then, if you judge the moment right. With a gentle exhalation, Frigg releases the feather from her palm. Instead of falling, it hovers momentarily before the loom, pulsing once with heightened luminescence, then dissolves into particles of light that spiral upward through the open ceiling and out into the vast expanse of stars. These motes of divine intent begin a journey downward through the branches of Yggdrasil, seeking the dreaming mind of one specific mortal in the middle realm. Odin and Frigg watch this departure in companionable silence, their faces illuminated by the fading trail of light. Then, with a small sigh that speaks of responsibilities both acknowledged and accepted, Frigg returns her attention to her loom. Her fingers resume their intricate dance across the threads, continuing the eternal work of weaving fate's design. Will you stay and watch for a time? She asks her husband, not looking up from her task, but welcoming his continued presence. If I may, Odin responds with simple dignity, moving to stand where he can observe without interfering. There is rare peace in these moments shared between them, respite from the constant vigilance required by their responsibilities to the 9 realms. Here, they are not merely all-father and all-mother, rulers and protectors, but partners in the deeper mysteries of existence. Hours pass in comfortable quiet, marked only by the gentle rhythm of the loom and the gradual shifting of stars overhead. Occasionally, Frigg pauses to select new threads or to step back and evaluate broader patterns emerging in her work. Odin sometimes offers observations or asks questions, but mostly he simply watches, his single eye reflecting the complex beauty taking shape before him. In the deepest part of night, when even Asgard's perpetual twilight dims to something approaching true darkness, a subtle change occurs in the weaving. The troublesome thread, Astrid's life path, begins to settle more naturally into the pattern. Its shifting colors stabilize somewhat, though subtle iridescence remains where it intersects with other lives. She dreams, Frigg murmurs, her fingers slowing to accommodate this development. The feather has found her sleeping mind. Odin steps closer, his interest renewed by this change. What does she see? Frigg's eyes take on a distant quality as she perceives the dream unfolding in Midgard. Her grandmother's hands, weathered by age but steady in their work, preparing a poultice of herbs rare and common. The old woman's voice reciting knowledge passed through generations. Some call this witchcraft, child, but it is simply the earth's wisdom speaking through its children. When men forgot to listen, women remembered. When new gods demanded exclusive worship, we kept faith with the land beneath our feet and the water that grants life. Odin smiles faintly at this characterization, not offended but rather appreciative of the perspective from below. The wisdom of understanding how mortals perceive divine mandates is one reason for his frequent travels disguised among them. Frigg continues relaying the dream vision. The grandmother shows specific preparations, valerian root combined with moss that grows only on north-facing stones, crushed with berries that appear black but reveal deep purple when their skin breaks. This is for wounds that fester from within, she explains. When poison runs deeper than the eye can see, the chieftain's wound, Odin observes, corrupted beyond ordinary healing. Yes, Frigg confirms. Now she sees her grandmother treating a similar injury long ago, a hunter gored by a boar whose tusks carried decay. The village headman, then the current chieftain's father, watching anxiously as his best hunter hovers between life and death. Her voice grows softer as the dream deepens, the old woman working without hiding her methods, accepted and respected for her knowledge. Things were different then, her grandmother tells her in the dream. Fear came later, with raiders who brought new beliefs and called our ways evil. The thread in Frigg's loom begins to take on a more golden hue in one potential path, while the alternate route deepens to a burnished bronze. Neither fully commits, but both gain definition and clarity. She begins to understand the context of her knowledge, Frigg explains. Not merely personal risk, but historical continuity. Not merely individual choice, but community heritage. The dream serves its purpose, Odin notes with satisfaction, not directing her choice, but illuminating its meaning. Indeed. Frigg's fingers work with renewed certainty, accommodating the thread's evolving nature within her pattern. The decision approaches with dawn. She wakes now, the dream fading, but its essence remaining. From their vantage in Asgard, they watch as the healer Astrid rises from her sleeping pallet in the pre-dawn darkness. Her movements show new purpose as she gathers specific herbs and implements, securing them in a small leather pouch worn at her waist. The amber pendant gleams at her throat as she straightens her simple clothing and steps out into the hushed morning. Dew dampens the hem of her woolen dress as she makes her way through the sleeping village toward the chieftain's longhouse. Guards nod respectfully as she approaches, their faces grave with the knowledge of their leader's worsening condition. Inside, village elders maintain vigil around the sickbed, their expressions lifting with desperate hope as the healer enters. She is chosen, Frigg observes, her voice neutral yet somehow approving of the decision itself rather than its specific content. She has, Odin agrees, watching as the woman kneels beside the chieftain and begins unpacking her medicines with steady hands. Though the path remains uncertain, As all paths ultimately are, Frigg reminds him, her fingers incorporating the now cooperative thread into her tapestry with skillful precision. We see further than most, but never to the final end of any journey. The mortal healer works with quiet confidence, combining elements that cause the watching elders to exchange uneasy glances. She speaks softly as she prepares her treatments, explaining each step with simple clarity. My grandmother taught me this, she tells them, offering neither apology nor concealment. It comes from before the time of our current ways, but its purpose has always been healing. Some faces show disapproval or fear, others curiosity, and at least one elder nods with recognition of practices remembered from childhood. The healer continues her work regardless, focusing entirely on her patient rather than the reactions surrounding her. When she applies the final poultice to the chieftain's wound and administers a draught of similarly complex brewing, she sits back on her heels and waits, hands folded calmly in her lap. The chieftain's labored breathing gradually eases. His fever-flushed face cools visibly, and the angry red streaks extending from his wound begin to fade. By the time full sunlight streams through the smoke hole in the longhouse roof, he has fallen into natural healing sleep rather than fevered unconsciousness. The immediate danger passes, Odin observes, both for the chieftain and for her. Yes, Frigg agrees, though repercussions will follow as surely as winter follows autumn. Some will call her savior, others sorceress. Her hands continue their work, the formerly troublesome thread now flowing naturally through complex intersections with others. But she stands firmly in her choice, neither hiding from consequences nor flaunting her knowledge. Odin watches a while longer as the scene in Midgard continues to unfold. The relief of some elders, the lingering suspicion of others, the gradual spreading of news throughout the waking village. Complexity and contradiction abound in the reactions, yet through it all, the healer maintains her center, tending her patient with the same care she would show anyone who needed her skills. You weave with greater ease now, he notes, returning his attention to Frigg's work. The pattern clarifies as uncertainty resolves, she explains. One future gains substance while others fade to mere possibility. Her skilled fingers guide threads of various hues through increasingly intricate arrangements. See how her choice affects these other lives. The chieftain's children here, the village's trading partnerships there, even this distant thread belonging to a traveler who will arrive next spring seeking specific knowledge. Odin studies these connections with appreciation for their complexity. The tapestry grows richer for the challenge she presented. As is often the case, Frigg acknowledges, with the wisdom of countless ages at such work, threads that resist simple placement frequently contribute most to the overall design. A rare smile of pure creative satisfaction touches her lips as she surveys her progress. It is why I do not force compliance when such resistance appears. The pattern reveals itself in time, often more beautifully for the initial difficulty. The All-Father nods thoughtfully, recognizing in her words a philosophy that extends beyond weaving to governance of realms and nurturing of souls. The wisdom of the All-Mother benefits worlds beyond counting, he says simply, without flattery or exaggeration. Frigg accepts this acknowledgement with characteristic grace, neither false modesty nor pride coloring her response. As does the far-seeing vision of the All-Father, she returns, completing the exchange of respect that has sustained their partnership through ages beyond mortal comprehension. The night has deepened toward that liminal time when stars begin to fade but dawn has not yet touched the horizon. In Frigg's tower, the quality of silence changes subtly, growing somehow deeper and more encompassing. The loom's gentle rhythm continues, but with diminishing urgency as this session of fate-weaving approaches completion. "I must soon walk other paths," Odin says eventually, regretful but accepting of duties that call him elsewhere. The ravens bring word of stirrings along Yggdrasil's western branches. Frigg nods without looking up from her work, understanding as always the demands that pull them in separate directions despite shared purpose. "Go with my thoughts accompanying you," she responds, the traditional farewell between them carrying layers of meaning accumulated over countless partings and reunions. Before leaving, Odin approaches the loom once more, studying the section where Astrid's thread now weaves harmoniously with those surrounding it. "We touched lightly here," he observes, yet perhaps significantly. "Perhaps," Frigg agrees, neither claiming certainty about outcomes nor dismissing the possibility of meaningful influence. The feather served its purpose whether required or merely supportive. Some knots loosen with the gentlest touch. Odin smiles at this wisdom, reaching out to brush his fingertips lightly against the back of Frigg's hand in a gesture of affection rare enough to be precious. "Until we meet again, Queen of Asgard," he says formally, though his eye holds warmth beyond protocol. "Until then, Wanderer," she returns, using the name by which mortals often know him, acknowledgement of his restless seeking across the realms. Her own eyes reflect starlight and something deeper as she briefly meets his gaze directly, with a slight inclination of his head that carries more respect than the deepest bow might from another. Odin turns and walks toward the tower doorway. His form seems to blur slightly at the edges as he approaches the threshold, his solid reality gradually yielding to something less defined. Between one breath and the next, he is simply gone, not with dramatic disappearance, but with the quiet certainty of a thought transitioning to its next natural progression. Frigg continues her weaving without pause, the departure of her consort changing nothing in her eternal work. Her fingers move with the same deliberate grace, her attention fully present with each thread as it finds its proper place in the ever-expanding tapestry. Outside her tower window, the first faint lightning along the horizon suggests the approach of day, though true dawn comes slowly to the realm eternal. In the newly arrived stillness, Frigg occasionally glances at the space where the Valkyrie's feather had rested. Though the token itself has gone to fulfill its purpose, a subtle impression remains, a memory of divine intention shared and actualized. Perhaps, when Brynhild wakes in the Hall of Wings, she will sense the journey her fallen feather undertook. Perhaps she will even glimpse the mortal life it touched, recognizing the woman she noticed in passing during her return flight. Such connections between realms, subtle, often unacknowledged, form their own patterns beneath the more visible workings of fate. Frigg sees these too, incorporating them into her weaving, with the same care she gives to more prominent threads. Nothing is too insignificant for her attention when all are part of the great tapestry. As the stars fade one by one overhead, Frigg's work session gradually concludes. The section begun during night's deepest hours now shows completion, not of the entire tapestry, which continues eternally beyond the edges of her current focus, but of this particular moment's pattern. She secures the final threads with practiced movements, neither rushed nor delayed, each gesture precise and purposeful. Rising from her loom, Frigg stretches gracefully, though her divine form knows no true fatigue. She moves to the tower window, looking out over sleeping Asgard, with eyes that see both immediate beauty and far-reaching implications. Beyond the Golden City, the Rainbow Bridge stretches toward realms uncounted, its colors subdued in pre-dawn light, but still visible to her heightened perception. somewhere along that bridge Odin walks or rides, perhaps already disguised for his next exploration. Somewhere in Midgard, a healer named Astrid continues her chosen path with new certainty born of dream-remembered wisdom. Somewhere in the Hall of Wings, a Valkyrie sleeps, one feather lighter than when she returned from gathering fallen warriors. All connected by invisible threads woven this night into Frigg's ongoing tapestry. The All-Mother turns from the window with serene acceptance of these connections and countless others under her care. She covers her loom with a cloth, woven of material so fine it appears almost as mist. Protection for the work, until she returns to continue it. Each thread remains secure in its position, each pattern holds its form beneath this covering, patiently awaiting the next session of divine attention. Frigg moves through her private chambers, making small adjustments to her sanctuary before taking her own rest. A sprig of lavender placed in water, a journal marked with observations for future reference, a cushion returned to its proper place. Ordinary actions performed with extraordinary mindfulness, the same care given to these simple tasks as to the weaving of cosmic destinies. Finally, she settles into a chair positioned to catch the first direct rays of dawn when they eventually arrive. Her posture remains perfect, without apparent effort, her hands resting lightly in her lap. To mortal eyes, she might appear to be merely sitting quietly, perhaps meditating or simply enjoying a moment of repose. In truth, her awareness extends far beyond her physical presence, traveling subtle pathways through the 9 realms, checking connections established during her night's work, ensuring the continued flow of fate's design. This too is part of her function as All-Mother, not merely creating patterns but maintaining them, nurturing the cosmic order with constant, compassionate attention. While Odin seeks and questions, Frigg preserves and sustains. Together they form a necessary balance, neither function complete without the other. The first true ray of dawn finally breaches the horizon, sending golden light streaming through Frigg's tower window. It illuminates her face, catching in the subtle silver strands woven through her otherwise dark hair and turning them to momentary fire. Her eyes, reflecting this new light, show depths that would drown any mortal who looked too directly into them, not with malevolence but with the sheer immensity of wisdom accumulated across ages. Somewhere between realms, between sleeping and waking, between being and becoming, Frigg smiles. The expression contains neither triumph nor resignation, but simple acceptance of what is, has been, and shall be. In that smile lives the compassion that makes her the All-Mother, caring for each thread in her vast tapestry with individual attention, despite their uncountable numbers. As Asgard awakens around her tower, life resuming its rhythms in the realm eternal, Frigg remains in this moment of perfect balance between activity and rest. Her night's work completed, her consciousness extends gently across the realms under her care. In Midgard, morning brings new challenges and opportunities to those whose threads she has woven. In the Hall of Wings, Valkyries stir from slumber, preparing for another day's solemn duty. In Valhalla, fallen warriors rouse themselves from celebration-induced sleep, ready to train again for Ragnarok's distant call. Through all these stirrings, Frigg maintains her center, embodying the quiet certainty that underlies existence itself. Though battles rage and treaties form, though lives begin and end across the 9 realms, though gods themselves scheme and struggle with their own destinies, her weaving continues, the great tapestry ever expanding, ever changing, yet fundamentally whole under her careful hands. In this truth lies peace for those with wisdom to perceive it. In this continuity rests security for realms conscious and unconscious of her work. In this eternal, gentle persistence dwells the deepest power, not of domination but of creation, sustained through endless cycles of becoming. The dawnlight strengthens, filling Frigg's tower with golden radiance. Another day begins in Asgard, distinct yet connected to all days before and after. The All-Mother receives this new beginning with the same grace she applies to all aspects of existence, neither clinging to what has passed, nor anxiously anticipating what approaches, but fully present in the eternal now, where her true power resides. And so the realms continue their dance, held in the invisible embrace of her awareness, each thread treasured in the infinite tapestry of being. Our Viking tale has now concluded. You will now hear the peaceful sounds of a crackling fire and gentle ambient noises that will continue throughout the night without any interruptions, helping you drift into a deep and restful sleep. May the stars of the northern sky watch over you, and may you find peaceful rest until the morning light. Sleep well, and good night.